Well, I think we could get underway. Welcome to St. Columba's annual parish meeting. Welcome if you're joining us in the nave, and welcome if you are joining us online. And it's good to be with you. We are going to be recording this gathering, and there will be time, I believe, for questions or comments, so keep those as you're going, or if you're joining us online, you can put those in the chat. And if you have questions and comments and we don't get to them, if time does not permit, and you put them in the chat, I'll get back to you on that. Let us pray. Almighty and ever-living God, ruler of all things in heaven and earth, we ask you to hear our prayers for this parish family of St. Columba's. Strengthen the faithful, arouse the careless, restore the penitent. Grant us all things necessary for our common life, and bring us all to be of one heart and mind within your holy church, through Jesus Christ our Lord. Amen. So this morning, we're going to cover a couple of things. First, you're going to hear a few words from me, and then we're going to hear from our treasurer, Tim Massad, and then we're going to hear from Lane Hurd, representing the Anti-Racism Task Force, and we'll have a chance to introduce the staff virtually, if not in person, and we'll hear from our senior warden, Abigail Gorman. And as we're doing that, I want to remind you that an integral part of this and every annual parish meeting is the opportunity to cast our ballots for those who are standing for offices of the vestry and as delegates and alternates to our diocesan convention. A special thanks to those of you who are standing for the positions of vestry, as those are competitive elections, or they're contested elections. So thank you for your willingness to stand and for your interest and eagerness in serving in that leadership role in the congregation. So some of you will know that for about 30 minutes every single day that DC public schools are in session, that the corner here of 42nd and Albemarle is absolutely teeming with people. Streams of students heading off to school and people heading off to work. And I have been on Tuesday mornings, each Tuesday morning, I get out on the street corner and I have a great big sandwich board sign that says, "Let's ask the priest at the corner." And I just stand there and smile and greet people and wear my stole, and I've had some extraordinary conversations. And a couple of weeks ago, a young woman, having dropped her kids off at school, stopped by and introduced herself to me and told me that her young son had found a map on the playground at the Janney School, and that he had determined that it was a treasure map. And after looking at the map carefully, he had determined that the treasure was located here on St. Columba's property. And apparently, they had done some walking around the property. And after great sleuthing, they had determined that the treasure was buried in the columbarium behind the fountain, in the wall behind the cross, behind the fountain. And so this woman wanted to know, she said, before we start excavating, and excavating is what they were ready to do, she cautioned me, she said, let me ask the priest at the corner what might be behind that cross. And so I assured her that indeed there was a treasure of a sort, because behind that cross is our large kitchen from which we can prepare meals and feed others. And she thought that was going to work. And meanwhile, she let me know that her two sons, ages 6 and 9, had not been to church, but they said they'd like to go to church. They'd like to go to this church. So, I was fascinated that there are maps that will show what many of us have already discovered, that there is treasure buried deep within this place. And Jesus said, where your treasure is, there will your heart be also. And we have great treasure that we have found, and great treasure that we can share and do share with another. What I want to do is just say a couple of things about our intention to live God's love. And two things on the individual level of what does it mean to live God's love. When I lead the Inquirer's class these days, one of the things that I say to the participants in that is that if you participate in the life of St. Columba's for some number of years, let's say 5 years, my great hope and intention is that at the end of those 5 years, you will be able to say, my life has changed as a result of my having traveled as part of this community. We might have different ways in which our life has changed. Perhaps we will have found ourselves more deeply connected with those whom we love. Perhaps we'll find ourselves more deeply connected with God. Perhaps we will have been given opportunities to engage in meaningful change in the world and the society around us. And I don't just put forward a hope, I've articulated a commitment that I, on behalf of all of us, will commit to supporting you that you might learn the ancient practices of the church, that at the end of this time you will have developed ways to pray. You will have spent time with Scripture. You will have had an opportunity to partner with others beyond and experience that change. But I don't only think about living God's love individually, I also think about it corporately, collectively, as we seek to live God's love together, what's the difference that might be made 5 years out? And rather than saying something programmatic, what I just wanted to say is a number of thoughts and conversations that I've been having with you and with others around this place. Just a selection that we are, one of the things that I'm paying attention to is what are the ways in which our practices of being the church, going to church, serving as church are changing, have changed in ways that continue to evolve as a result of COVID, but now we're moving forward into this new terrain. What are the ways that our current practices and structures enable our intention to become ever more anti-racist in the way we live, and what are the practices and structures that inhibit that? Totally different thing. I'm aware that at any given time, our children and youth ministers are aware that there are 2 or 3 or 4 of our young people who are navigating thoughts about their own gender identity and sexual orientation, and how do we, as a manifestation of the love of God, support them in that exploration. And how do we navigate the fact that we're eager to support people in developing their life in Christ, and many of us are finding that it's important to worship at home or removed, and how do we support you in that? All through this, our nursery school has been thriving. We're at the largest student enrollment ever. It was an essential practice during the COVID. 100 students, 23% of whom are people of color. 41% of the faculty and staff of the nursery school are people of color. Our councilwoman, Mary Che, has asked me, does the rest of your neighborhood know your deep commitment to the environment? Because that's something that is of huge importance to many others. And those are the sorts of questions and conversations that I'm just living with all the time, and invite you to join with me in those conversations as we go forward. And I've got to see because I'm my time. But before I do, what I want to point out, and we point this out each year one way or another, is that all of this ministry of living God's love is not something that any one of us does. This is a collective effort that each of you and all of us play a vital role in this. And I want to especially thank those of you who have been exercising roles of leadership in the congregation and are stepping down or have stepped down in this past year, and those of you that are stepping up into those roles. And so thanks to Bob Oding and Pat Riley as delegates to convention, and to Jim Losey and Jean Ann Wright, who with Carrie Peister have been leading the Refugee Response Ministry. The two of them are stepping down as Carrie continues. Susan DeWitt and Gina Lagomorsino with our welcome team, handing off to Elizabeth Hale and Lisa Nelson. Kelly Rubenstein for running our bookstore, which is closed at this time. To Praveen Jayaraja, who launched our family homelessness initiative and is handing that off. To Heather Jones and Carrie Peister, who have been leading our youth council and handed that off to Charlotte Hart, who's stepping up. To Sarah Brockler, who's now the convener of a new children's council. And let's see, I think, okay, I skipped over these guys. To Keisha Evans and Lane Hurd, stepping up for Anti-Racism Task Force, and our Nave Repair Oversight group, Don Crane, John Nolan, and Betsy Oster. Master Planning Committee stepping up, Sarah Glenn and Stephen Smith. Elizabeth Vaden stepping up to lead us in an affordable housing advocacy group, and a larger advocacy council of Gina Lagomorsino and Elizabeth Vaden. For those vestry members who are stepping down after their terms, Elizabeth Lewis, Chris Moore, Carrie Peister, and Michelle Prince. And last and certainly not least, Joy Bates Boyle handing over to Maddie Schlutzer the co-chair role, working with Catherine Potter for our annual stewardship campaign. So my deep thanks to each and to all, and I'm going to hand this over now to Tim Massid. And let's see, you have a microphone right there, I guess.
Okay, good morning. Thank you, Ledley. Good morning. It's good to see you all. Let me just get organized here. Sorry. Okay, I am very pleased to present to you the Treasurer's Report this morning. I'm not sure if you can see that. I'll cover the audit first and then talk about financial summary for the church and the nursery school as a whole, because we are consolidated. Then we'll look at the church on a standalone basis and talk about the budget for this year, and then talk briefly about stewardship. So first of all, the audit, main thing is it's done. There were no material weaknesses, no significant deficiencies, so that's very good news. In terms of the numbers, the key thing, you'll see that cash and investments as well as contributions are higher. That's largely because of the nave renovation contributions. That was about $2.25 million, and that hits both those categories. Otherwise, and what we'll see next year is our property will increase because of the nave work. Our accounts payable increased because we had these nave renovations going on. The debt for the nave, which we incurred, was not incurred until the end of the fiscal year. Our fiscal year is June 30, so that does not show up on here. Okay, so then on the revenue side, pretty much as I said, the nave contributions show much higher revenue there, if you can see that. Last year it was about $3 million total, or actually for the school, sorry, $5.5 million total for the school and the church. This year, $7.5, again, because of the nave. And, we had the PPP loan, the government loan, in 2020, we don't have that this year. So that's the other big change there, where you see program income 596 last year. On the expense side, not any real dramatic change there. And again, because the NAVE expenses don't show up on our operating budget or on this consolidated audit, if you will, because we capitalize all those costs. So again, what we'll see next year is our property account will increase. But otherwise, expenses overall were pretty similar. I'll get into some more detail in just a minute. So there you can see it kind of graphically, and this is now just the church. Revenue versus expenses. And you will see that our expenses are a little bit higher. And you might say, well, gee, that's not good. And it's not, but that includes what we call the non-cash expenses of depreciation. So if we take those out, then our revenue is a little higher. Now, that also included the PPP loan. If we take out the PPP loan as well, you'll see that 2020 wasn't quite as good as it looked on the previous slide, but it was still okay. So the revenue breakdown, and again, this is just the church. As in all years, pledges are the key thing. Pledges are 80% of our revenue, so we're very dependent on pledges. Our other main sources include what we call non-pledge contributions and offerings. Offerings are what we get, you know, in services and so forth. Now, obviously, since the church was closed, those were down a little bit. And then the nursery school reimburses us for their costs. So significant changes in revenue. Again, general contributions didn't really change all that much. The NAVE contributions, which, sorry, that's that orange circle down here. That's separate, doesn't go on the operating budget, but we received it, and that's what's paying for the NAVE. So that was a big difference. Our program and event revenue declined, not surprising, because we weren't doing as much. Our investment income increased because, again, investments did very well, as those of you who have investments and have checked your statements would know. On the expense side, the big expense, of course, is our staff. That represents over 50% of our budget. And then our plant expenses are the next big thing. And we'll get into a little comparison here. Personnel did go up, and that's because we filled some positions that have been unfilled. That's the main reason for that. Our general and administrative expense went down. Again, just a variety of things there. Plant overall was about the same, but what happened on plant was that we thought we were going to save money on utilities because the church was closed, and we didn't really save that much. We saved a little bit, but not as much as we had hoped. But we did also have some repairs that we weren't expecting. Program revenue, program expense was down, as was program revenue, of course, because we weren't doing as much. Compared to budget, you know, we were pretty much on track versus our budget with respect to personnel and general administrative. Again, plant, we thought we could save more money on utilities. That didn't happen. We also in the plant category, we had more expenses related to streaming services, because some of that's in plant, some of it's in G&A also. So here again in words, increased expenses relative to virtual gatherings. supplies, licensing agreements, professional fees. Decreased expenses in repairs and maintenance, actually because we completed some work in 2020. Slightly decreased expenses related to accounting, but some other professional fees went up a little bit. And good news, bad debt. So bad debt is when pledges aren't fulfilled. And we sort of estimate what that's going to be. We have a budget for it. It was much lower than we expected and than in past years, so that's great news. Thank you all for fulfilling your pledges. So the nave renovations. We raised, as I said, almost $2.25 million. And that is to be paid in 5 years. About $600,000 of that has already been paid. The costs to date, we've actually paid out about $1.7 million. We estimate a little bit over $400,000 to go. A lot of that $400,000, the work has already been done. We're just, the bills haven't all been paid or hit the accounting system. In terms of actual costs that we haven't incurred, we think it's only about $125,000, and that will be for the landscaping and the labyrinth out front. With that and the financing costs, in other words, the cost of the interest on our debt, the total is what we estimate about $2.3 million. So just slightly over what we raised, and we might even save money on that financing cost depending on how quickly we can pay down the debt. So all that's very good news. And that's the debt. What we did was we already had some debt that had a mortgage on the property, as well as we have a second piece of indebtedness with respect to the house on Albemarle Street. So we refinanced the main debt of the church with the Episcopal Church Building Fund, and we increased it to pay for the nave. So that debt, it is payable over 25 years, but as I said, we hope to pay that off over the next 5. Our budget for this year, pretty similar to the past year. We're projecting just a slight increase in pledges. Expenses are pretty close to what they were this past year. Again, revenue increased for pledge contributions by 2.3%. We have slight increases in some of the other categories because we've reopened, because we'll be having more services and so forth, and more activities in the church. So those categories are slightly up. On the expense side, not any real dramatic change. Personnel expenses increased by only 1%, and that includes actually a cost of living adjustment. Utilities have increased a little bit. Maintenance agreements have decreased. Repairs, we think, will decrease because we've now done a lot of work. But if there's one category in our budget that we can't predict, it's the plant. It's the physical property, and what does it cost us to maintain that? And of course, we've all read about inflation creeping up. We'll see what impact that has also. This budget was prepared before we saw some of those news stories, so we'll see. Other developments, I want to welcome Greg Parker. Before I get to stewardship, Greg Parker, our new Director of Finance and Administration. I know Ledley's going to introduce him in a minute. We'll also have the Master Planning Committee process as we think about how to maximize the use of our space, and there will be some costs associated for that this year that aren't in our budget. So stewardship. So let me just step back for a moment. 20 months ago, we didn't really know what would happen with our budget. Could we make our budget? Could we keep people on staff? We saw, millions of people starting to lose their jobs. Perhaps some of you did, or you had children or loved ones who lost their jobs. And so we asked people, contribute what you can. And if you're able to increase your contribution, if you're in that situation, please do. And our pledge revenue was okay, both for 2020 and this past year, because all of you did. And many of you increased your pledges. And so we're very, very grateful. And of course, many of us who found that we could work from home, as long as we were healthy, you know, the pandemic wasn't that bad in a way. And that's kind of the story generally. And I want to leave you with 2 slides, because really what happened to us as a church in terms of our budget, in terms of our investments, kind of reflects the fact that the pandemic had very uneven economic consequences. And I'd like you just to keep that in mind as we think about stewardship going forward. This is a chart of the distribution of wealth over the last 10 years. And all of the categories other than this bottom red line represent the top 50% of the population. And all of those went up. And the higher up you are on that income ladder, the more it went up. Whereas the bottom 50% didn't really go up. And yet, this is a hardship indicator reflective of Census Bureau information, surveys. And as the headline says, hardship is below December 2020 peak, yet still widespread. What does that mean? Well, the top blue line, in case you can't read it, is the number of households who say they're having difficulty covering their expenses. And that is 30% of American households. And the number of households, the bottom line, the middle line is the number of people not caught up on rent. That is almost 20%. And the bottom line is number of people with not enough to eat. That is almost 10%. So it's something to keep in mind as we think about stewardship, as we think about what we as a church can do, and it's great that we're able to restart a lot of our outreach. Again, thank you for your generosity. If you've pledged, thank you very much. If you haven't pledged, please consider doing so. If you can increase your pledge, please consider doing so. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Tim. And Bronwyn, am I right that so far the number of the pledges in are at 78 point something %? Thank you, thank you. Lane Hurd, please.
Good morning. I'm going to go briskly, but I want to pause over this first item of information, which is the composition of the task force. My co-chair, as you heard, is Keisha Evans. It has been a great blessing this year to work with her. She's smart, she's wonderful, but she's teaching Sunday school this morning, which is why I'm here. And this has been a really dedicated group meeting over this past year. So we are joined by Lauren Counts and Laura Akua and Catherine Huffman, Bill and Patty Jensen, Peter Lynch. Cammie is with us all the time as almost a third co-clerk, and we have really been blessed in our meetings this year to have Ledley and Abigail with us for almost every session. We all want to hear from you. You can contact us anytime. Certainly after today's presentation, please feel free to do so. So here is the charter that the vestry gave us 9 months ago. It's a 2-page charter. This is distilled. You will note about this that there's a lot here about process and procedure. It's about embedding a way of thinking into the parish. When Ledley introduced the task force to the parish a year ago in a sermon, he said, this is not a project. There is no end date. This is a commitment to a way of living and a commitment to a preferred future. You see that reflected in this charter. But a question that Ledley addressed at that time, and a question that we've wrestled with over these last few months, and it's a question that's come from some of you, is why are we an anti-racist task force? Why aren't we pro something? Well, Ledley's answer to this question in the sermon introducing the task force was to say that a commitment to anti-racism as individuals, as a church, was a natural expression of our yes to Jesus' call to discipleship, and a natural expression of our yes to Jesus' summary of the law, which was to love our neighbors as ourselves. As we as a task force have wrestled with this question and thought about even whether we should rename ourselves, we stand with this title, and we do because we believe it's a way of living out what we confess every week and what we pledge in the baptismal covenant. We confess every week not only the evil we do individually, but the evil done on our behalf, the evil in which we're complicit. And our baptismal covenant commits us not simply to strive to seek that of Jesus in every person, but to persevere in resisting evil and to renounce the evil powers of this world. So our commitment is to stand by this title. We think it's important. But in saying that, I want to make clear that we do not see our job, we're not pointing the finger of blame at individuals. We're not pointing the blame at groups. We're not adopting a political agenda. We're not saying that anti-racism is the sole agenda of St. Columba's, or even it's the most important item in the agenda, but it's important that we do these three things. We think our objectives are threefold. To confront the truth, maybe a personal truth, it may be a truth about our church, our city, our country, to confront the truth, to understand how we've benefited from systems in the past. And secondly, to confess that and to acknowledge our responsibility to our neighbors. And third, and this comes through very strongly in the survey, about which I'll talk in just briefly in a minute, to take action. This should not be about words. This is not about virtue signaling. If it is, then we failed. So that's our mission. And lastly, I just want to touch on this. Many of you, and thank you, took part in the survey that was administered in August and September. There were more than 200 of you who responded to the survey, and we're going to find an opportunity soon to be able to, in a full fashion, present to you the findings of that survey. This morning, I just want to say this much. You may have a hard time reading this. This is the way the survey skewed. It was the older parishioners who responded in large numbers, over 71% over 55. It was skewed to the women in the parish. It was skewed to those who've been here 15 years or more, but it's a pretty fair reflection of the racial makeup of the church. 90% of the respondents were white, 5% were black. You may remember that there were a large number of questions that asked you to answer on a scale from I strongly disagree to I strongly agree. Strongly disagree, strongly agree. I'll just show you the results for 3 of these questions. Should being an anti-racist church be a priority for the parish? Well over 70% of the parish said yes. Are we welcoming to people of all races? Well, it's still 70% plus, but we're a little less sure about that. Do we count people of other races among our closest friends? Not just closest friends in the church, but close friends anywhere. Well, a little more than a third say yes. They know that for a fact, but you can see it distributes a little differently across the group. What's an intriguing result? And there's this: do we hear diverse perspectives from people of different races? Well, we're less certain about that. And the question might be, is that because we don't hear diverse voices? Is that because they're not present? Is that because we're not a very diverse congregation? Something to be discussed. But these are just 3 or 4 out of about 15 questions you answered. And then you were most helpful of all in the narrative responses. I think almost every person who responded didn't just check the box. They wrote answers to the open-ended questions. And those open-ended answers, single-spaced in tiny print, run to more than 75 pages. So there's a lot to talk about. And this is probably too hard for you to read, but we ask, what does it mean to you to be anti-racist? Some of you are quite honest. I'm not quite sure what we're talking about here. We asked how this affected your relationship to the church, and there were people who said, I'm only here because you're committed to this work. And others who said, this just may be talk. But there are 50-something of those questions, and there's a lot to tell you about there. So we look forward to doing that. We've got a forum on February the 6th, but I think we'll try to talk to you about this survey before that time. That's a little long to wait. And we look forward to an ongoing conversation. Thank you.
Thank you, Lane, and I'm really glad to introduce somebody many of you already know, Courtney Hundley, but she's with us in her new capacity as Minister for Member Engagement. Yay.
Thank you. Good morning. Lily asked me to speak this morning about fellowship. And so I was reflecting on the St. Columba's Mothers Group, which was my entry into this church about 17 years ago. The St. Columba's Mothers Group has gathered in small and large groups for well over 20 years. We have mothers with new babies, grandmothers supporting their children and grandchildren, and mothers with children of all ages in between. Before the pandemic, we would meet in room 220 on Wednesday mornings at 10 o'clock for fellowship, host speakers to learn about parenting and more about the church. We'd hold each other's babies, we'd pray together, we'd have fabulous monthly potlucks and an amazing annual Christmas party. How have we supported each other during these extraordinary times across the last 18 months? We've continued to pray together and for one another. We've taken walks in the woods, we've broken bread together, we've offered meals, we've meditated, and all of these have been reminders to one another that the grace of God is near when things are difficult. For some, Mothers Group has been an entry into this large parish. Others come to events and may not worship regularly with us. And across the pandemic, we had regular Zoom attendance by a dear member that moved to Paris a couple of years ago, and she got on every single Wednesday morning. Last Monday evening, 20 of us gathered in the courtyard to celebrate the Holy Eucharist and to name and share memories into our circle of loved ones that have been lost. There were tears and hugs and support, and after the service, time for fellowship. Our group is alive and well. We look forward to welcoming new visitors into our fold, to seek ways to serve and be the body of Christ in the larger community, and continue to serve as lights for one another. There are words by Julian of Norwich that I feel encapsulate the spirit of this group and the way that we kind of hold each other and have held each other up. And they are this: if there is anywhere on earth a lover of God who is always kept safe, I know nothing of it, for it was not shown to me. But this was shown to me, that in falling and rising again, we are always kept in that same precious love. Thank you.
Thank you, Courtney. And another person who's now with us in a new capacity, Michelle Prince, overseeing our pastoral care ministry. Thank you, Michelle.
Thanks, Ledley. Good morning, everyone. Yes, I'm your new pastoral care coordinator and a 20-year parishioner who joined the staff in September. Today, I want to shine a light on one of our caring ministries, the flower delivery ministry. Over the years, many of us have been recipients of a beautiful floral arrangement made from the Sunday flowers. Typically, 6 smaller arrangements are created on Sunday afternoons and delivered to people's homes by members of the flower delivery ministry the next day. This caring ministry is one of the many ways we offer support and acknowledge the joys and sorrows of our lives. During the pandemic, when there were no live services and no flowers on the altar each Sunday, the flower delivery ministry carried on by writing and mailing notes to those who would have received a floral arrangement. I want to recognize and thank Judy Rock and Susan Ruth, who wrote notes each week. As you can see, we now have beautiful flowers on the altar, and the flower delivery ministry has resumed as of October. Judy and Susan continue to send notes to those who are selected by our team to receive flowers. To me, this is a lovely example of the way we build a caring community and fulfill our mission to live God's love. I encourage each of you to let us know what is happening in your life and the lives of people close to you. Our pastoral care team includes the clergy, staff, and lay people, and we are here to pray, listen, visit, provide a meal, and just care about you. But we can't do any of those things if we don't know that you need them. God is omniscient, but we aren't. You can reach us at pastoral@columba.org or by contacting me directly. My information is on the website. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Michelle. I want to just race through one thing, which is normally, I don't know what normal is anymore, but one of the things I would have done in annual meetings past is invite all the staff to stand up and join me here, but some of them are teaching and many of you are online and wouldn't be able to see us all. So what I want to do is commend to you, there are little booklets that you can pick up physically in the back here. Yes, they're bright red. They say, meet the staff. Thank you, Clark. Or you can visit this online. We've got this little booklet up there. But I just want to name what an extraordinary blessing and gift it is for me and for all of us to get to work together on this staff. Joshua, Daniel, and David Griswold are up with those at Holy Cross Monastery as we meet. Amy is here. I'm here. Susan Flanders has been leading well, she's right here, but she did We Worship today with Katie McGurvey. Let's see, we have our seminarians, Shane and Bailey, and I'm not going in order here. Cami Caudill, mentioner from Community Engagement. If you haven't yet been to We Worship, then you haven't heard the amazing music of our new We Worship musician, Sarah Curtin, so check that out. Marina Davis coordinates our library. Lauren DeVito's walking around taking pictures of you, so smile when you see her. She's our Director of Communications, and Amanda Fulton helps pull all the communication together behind the scenes, and Rashid Ghana continues to be our press man. He's one of our longest serving members of the staff, does all the printing. And John Gunther Verger, who's missing today because he's off visiting family in Germany, and Mitch Gufanti, who many of us know because he's always there for us whenever we need anything helpful on the property. Diane Heath has been at the keyboards and in the choir room for 26 years, I believe it is. And Courtney, who's just joined us, we've just heard from her. Amna Hussein, if you come into the building on a weekday evening, Amna will greet you and help coordinate our visitors and guests. And Anthony Cottrell, Director of Operations, has overseeing all of this. Katie McGurvey, Director of Children's Ministries, working with Elliot May, Youth Director. Anik Milda assists with the finance. Kate Murphy is the head of the nursery school. And I think, let's see, Greg Parker, Tim mentioned him. Greg is with us today, newest member of the staff as Director of Finance and Administration. Michelle just joined us. Bronwyn works all the magic behind the scenes for all of our digital. I mean, Jamal is doing the digital stuff. Bronwyn got us started. Jamal is right there behind the board. Thank you, Jamal. We see you. You are fabulous. Larry Shelley is in the wings, waiting to see when we get the water ministry up and going. And Ann Tim Payne, of course, Director of Music Ministry. And who have I got? And Jacqueline Wilson is now, if you call the office, it is Jacqueline who will answer the phone and help you find your way. And she's right in the front office. And it is fabulous. They are supporting all of us. So what a treat it is to be with them. And Abigail's going to give us a few words. And as is often the case, I'm afraid, if you have questions and answers or comments, I want to hear them. So if you don't get a chance to express them in this meeting, please, please, please find me or just shoot me a note. And if, Bron, when you've gotten them on the chat, Tim is saying the same regarding the finances, because often we have questions around those finances. Abigail Gorman is our senior warden. And don't forget to vote if you haven't already voted.
Good morning. I will make this very quick. Despite what I'm about to say, in 2019, we set out on a bold path with a new strategic vision to strengthen community, practice our faith, embrace our world, and build capacity. And I think today we have seen the fruits of all of that bold vision that there were hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of collected thoughts and feedback about what we wanted to do together. And what I am so grateful for is to see the build capacity. We are sitting in it today. We have a clean, unqualified audit. It is the only standard you can have. We have embraced our world through our efforts to end family homelessness in Washington, D.C. We have clearly practiced our faith together, daily bread, and strengthen our community. I think we have just heard about the communities of faith within this organization are really remarkable. And we are looking outward in terms of how we are in the world and how we can be. And we know we are not done. And I am thrilled to be a part of this. And I want to thank everyone who's made this happen. Again, we are not done. And I'm looking forward to more in the coming years and the next year. And I would just leave you with 3 thoughts. Vote, pledge, and a huge thank you to the staff. We are so grateful, Ledley, the clergy, and all of the staff. It would not be possible without you. You held us all up, you kept us going, and I just want to say a huge thank you. And to all of you, the parishioners, the wisdom and you bring your gifts to all of the work in this church, and I am in awe. In every meeting, in all of the meetings that I am in awe of this community. And so I am so grateful. Thank you all.
Thank you. I'm going to invite Amy to come forward and offer a prayer and blessing for this gathering. Let me just see by way of hands. I'm not going to be able to call in. Are there people who have questions or comments? Okay, so maybe there are online, and I'd be happy to hear from you, as would Tim Massad or anyone else. And Amy, I think you're going to need a microphone.
I think, yeah, that's a good idea.
Maybe you don't.
I've been wanting to do that all day. The Lord be with you. Holy One, we thank you. We thank you for this place. We thank you for all those who love and lead this community. I pray that your continued presence and wisdom guide us, lead us, and hold us. Amen.
Go in peace to love and serve the Lord. And if you're coming to church outside, bundle up, and I'll see you there.